about the Complete Streets project that was presented at the last Parks and Rec Commission meeting. Tonight we're going to have a work session, which will be more of an intimate exchange of ideas. Tonight we have Jessica Coleman from WRT, who will be leading the work session tonight. And if we have people that are watching from home, we invite you to come down and participate and have a chair at the table. The audio during the work session may not be as fantastic as we'd like, but we would love for you to come down. So I'll let Jessica start the work session.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here. I work with WRT. We're a landscape architecture and planning firm in San Francisco, and we've been involved with several projects here in Albany. And this large project that we're involved with is the San Pablo Avenue and Buchanan Street pedestrian and safety improvements. And a piece of that project, which we'll be focusing on tonight, is a gateway garden that we're designing right at Buchanan and Madison. Clearly, you're familiar with the site since it's right outside the building, right across the street. And right now, the site is surrounded by, the arterial street and then Buchanan that cuts through. And there's going to be some realignment and shifting of the street, so it'll be closed off to cars in a section, and some of that auto space will be reclaimed and turned into space for people and plants. So the project is now a piece of these larger pedestrian and safety improvements, and it's a piece that we're going to be talking about the concept design. We're still in the initial phase of the project, and we wanted to have the opportunity to talk with some important stakeholders and community members about the concept so far. So I have a little bit of more developed ideas that we're going to share at a more casual roundtable format. Run through this presentation, which I say loosely because it's really just framing the conversation so that you all can see what has been developed so far, and we can hear some of your ideas.
So can you tell us, specifically what level of comments you're hoping to get from us? Where the streets are, down to the art in the
Sure.
Because that was
Absolutely, yes. So to be very clear, it's still in concept phase, which means that the details have not been worked out yet. The space has been, kind of the framework has been set up for the space, but the details of exactly how features would look and exactly what all the design elements would be further developed after a little bit more dialogue and once we're further along in the design process. So this is kind of the fun part where you're feeling inspired, you're collecting images, you're talking about ideas, and then we're going to turn that into reality over the course of the project.
Which is the fun part, apparently.
Well, you can. There are fewer limitations at this point, and then you have to deal with the rest as we get. Yeah.
Well, I think I understood from last time, the design would then go to traffic and safety to make sure that the turning in and out, so we don't need to worry as much about that part because they're going to navigate that.
It was presented at traffic and safety, and everything was copacetic.
Perfect, great.
So we don't have to worry about the technical aspects. This is more, to get your sense as the Park and Recreation Commission and, those aspects.
Perfect.
How people are using it, how it's being inhabited by vegetation, and how it's making a new place for all. So as you all clearly have an understanding, this is part of a bigger project. And this piece that we're focusing on, we've started thinking of as the gateway garden, because it's not quite a plaza, it's not a park, but it's more of a garden. It's a place for vegetation and people, and it's a place that will be quite different from what is currently existing. Right here, you're familiar with the site. Lots of civic activities, City Hall, the police station, the fire station. You can see the proposed Buchanan realignment, where cars will still be able to come through, driveways aren't interrupted, but the space that is all in yellow will be available for people to use and for plants
so the yellow seems like it includes the existing sidewalk, so that will be taken, so any sidewalk here will replace the existing sidewalk,
So,
just to be clear.
yeah, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah.
Okay.
It's still completely
It seems like I saw one drawing where the sidewalk may be different, I don't know, so I was just
Yeah.
trying to be clear.
Well, it's still a conceptual phase.
Oh, no,
so,
absolutely, absolutely.
And the red is bicycle.
Yeah, and so the red is showing the bicycle path that runs adjacent to the farm and Ocean View Elementary School. That's kind of, at this point, where more people are, as opposed to where a lot of truck traffic.
And I think I understood from last time that some treatment is happening right here. Are you all involved in that to make that kind of a little bit more of an entry point to that path, or?
There are a lot of other pieces along the corridor
Okay.
that will be enhanced.
But in terms of tying it into whatever it looks like over there, is this tied into the bigger picture of San Pablo?
Sorry, did you want to?
No, I don't know if anything's happening there, but at our last meeting, I suggested we just do something very small here.
Across the street,
to kind of
like
frame it
bicycles.
so that you can vote, but that was just, and I'm really just talking plans, just no
Yeah,
action plans
yeah.
on either side of the street, nothing
Right.
hard, but
Right,
I think that might be interesting.
That may
I don't
be.
think it is plans.
yeah. So, again, right now it's really a car-dominated space, not really a place for people at all. But when we're doing some of our analysis, we were realizing that it is a site for water. And we started thinking a lot more about stormwater management and how that could be seen as an opportunity for design of the plaza and the garden itself. The area that you see highlighted in blue all drains to that area. You can see there are some storm drain inlets, and there are a lot of cross drains. And so there's actually a tremendous amount of stormwater that is channeling into this section. There's too much to think about this actually being a full stormwater treatment area there. But it was a great opportunity for inspiring our design and inspiring the way that we begin to think about the space.
Can I just ask you, is
Yeah.
this storm drain versus cross drain? Is it just where multiple ones come together?
Yeah, that's how it's all flowing together. So we started getting really excited thinking about this gateway garden as a place for movement. Right now that movement is primarily cars, but it can be the focus of the movement of children more. Tons of school children walking into school, to and from school during the week. On the weekend, I know it's a popular spot for soccer, and it's a popular spot for birthday parties. I should add that although I'm very professionally interested in this project, I'm also personally interested because I do live in Albany myself. So I'm familiar with kind of the different patterns of people and the type of traffic that we see there. So a place for movement, it's a high energy zone. But in addition to the people and the school children, it's also a place where water's flowing. And we're seeing that. It's also a place where wind passes through, and some level of wildlife capacity. We started thinking of it as an opportunity, as a place for discovery, where people could start to really engage with the environment, especially more than they currently do, and where they can start thinking about some of the ecological benefits that come along with gardens. And generally speaking, it's a place of identity. It is very visually striking as you're coming into the city, sort of the first major potential gateway into the city off of the highway. So for it to have more of a visual and civic and ecological identity seemed like it was the right theme and the right tone for the city of Albany. So we started looking through different precedent images to get excited about the potential of different opportunities at the site. We started looking at some really graphic, really bold landmarks that could be integrated. We're thinking about, the passage of time and the movement of sun with some sort of sundial, or just the treatment of different surfaces. The ground versus some seat wall, all different color elements, different textures. Signage could definitely be integrated into this as both monumental and more discrete signage. We thought that it was a great opportunity for some play elements, since there's so many children walking through the area, and it could be a moment for them to stop, kind of play along and discover something new. Perhaps installing some bird feeders so that birds could stop and become part of that experience, or some wind elements that might I know like in Dolores Park, there's some really beautiful wind sculptural elements and some play elements that involve different sounds. So just something that was striking and really made more of a statement, you know, hey, this is something that people in Albany care about, and here are some more images that talk to those different textures and patterns and materials that could inspire our design.
Some of these kind of seem to cross into like public art. Is that something that you all do, or do you take some contractor out for that art?
Well, we're designers, so we absolutely design elements on site. I think for this project in particular, we're thinking it more as a cohesive design, so it would be handled by the designers themselves.
So you build it also.
Yeah, yeah. And then we get down to actually how the site would work. So you could see the existing sidewalk that you were talking about.
I think maybe this line threw me off before.
Yeah, that's kind of just the drawing. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, I'm just talking about, yeah.
That's okay. This line looks like a sidewalk. I see.
And what we thought might really enhance the space and make it feel like more of an experience was to add more of a meandering path. So people could have a more playful experience and an opportunity to discover when they're moving through the space. But it would still be connected to the sidewalk, it would still be completely accessible, the driveway would still exist, but that sidewalk would become widened. Hi, welcome.
So, in that picture, there's one more little piece that looks like it's kind of over here.
The little traffic thing with the one tree on it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And as I flip through, you'll get better images that are a little bit more zoomed out. This is zoomed in to show, so you can have a little bit higher level of detail of the site itself. We're talking.
Oh, the driveway.
When we zoom out and you get some different perspectives, it might help understand the space a little bit better.
Can I just ask a couple terminologies?
Yeah.
Bioretention area and
Yeah.
stormwater runoff.
Yep, so I was just about to get to those.
Okay.
We started talking about this idea of the movement of water. So one of the concepts was to put in a runnel that would not always be filled with water, but in storm events, when we're starting to see some of those more now, the water would come from adjacent sidewalks and hills and properties and run through there, and it could actually fill up. And it would be a temporal thing. It wouldn't be like that all the time, but the water could fill up, and then it would be directed into the adjacent landscape, and that is the bioretention area. So water comes into the runnel and then gets distributed into the rain garden.
How does that affect if trash gets in there? Because I live really close to Solano and we get a lot of trash in our
Sure.
yard.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if it would be a problem with the.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of it. But I
Yeah,
just wondered
yeah.
about that.
I mean, trash is always an issue,
Yeah.
no doubt about it. It wouldn't be like a huge storm surge as far as, swooping up lots of street litter and traffic. So, and
No, people just use it and they just leave
To
their
throw it
wrappers.
Or
And,
even just, I could see if it's like there's a cavity there, right? Like it's
The
lower
depression.
than the surface, and I
Yeah.
can see like little plastic, something gets stuck in,
Absolutely.
and nobody takes it out. Like, who's gonna take it out, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's always an issue with public space, no matter what. Since the idea of the water isn't to stay in the runnel for very long, the idea is really to have it pour out and be filtered in the rain garden, so it wouldn't have to be very deep. It would
So
be.
you don't think it would trap
It
trash in there?
typically it shouldn't. It's not like a channel.
Okay.
It's really more of a
I think
guide.
Todd
Would
would
guide
be able to
it.
answer that question, because I see you out there with the.
No,
There-
I think it's all gonna trap trash. I mean, it's just,
But do you
You know.
feel like when you've gone out, because you really do have a sense, right?
Yeah,
Like, when you go out, do you see stuff stuck in little, in that kind of,
well, I don't know if there's anything like that. We don't so much.
you don't see that?
Well, but the other part is we pick it up every other day, so it doesn't have a chance to get stuck.
And-
We go out 3 times a week.
And this wouldn't be much?
I don't, I thought of that too, and sure, it's gonna trap some trash. I don't think there's, but we're in the environment. That's kind of the way it is, and we kind of brings the discussion of what the maintenance of this is gonna be anyway.
Right,
If it needs
That is a question.
care every month or every week.
That's a macro
Yeah.
question, right? It's a DPW question, but.
And typically it replaces some storm drains that need maintenance now.
Yeah, and another way to think of it is some of that those pollutants and that trash that you can't actually see, some of the heavy metals and all.
Will be filtered out.
Right, it starts to actually be a filter with the rain garden. So even though there might be some trash that gets stuck, it's actually doing a larger stormwater quality improvement.
Oh, yeah, no,
So-
okay, sorry, can you explain that? How is it doing the stormwater improvement?
Yeah, so the water that gets filtered into the site and goes through the runnel will then be channeled into the rain garden that's just adjacent to it. And then as the water filters down into the ground and goes through the soils and the layers of rocks,
So all of this
it
water
starts to
here
get
goes
clean.
into adjacent here, is that what you're saying? Or-
So yeah,
Oh,
see
to the
the,
green.
mm-hmm,
Okay, cool. Very cool.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So what traps some of the particles there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the soil, the rocks, the
I should have brought
medium.
the graphic that we have at public works. Or
So
it's,
it
Right to
doesn't
go
go
there.
straight to the stormwater
No, no,
system.
it doesn't.
goes-
Right, so it gets cleaned and filtered, so, and it's an opportunity for some interpretive signage and education about that type of process. I mean, I know there's some of that at the middle school. There's a little
Oh,
rain
yeah, I've
garden
seen
there, and, the way that the treatment of the sidewalk and the grate, and, it indicates, oh yeah, what's going on here? You see it's at an angle, and it's leading into this rain garden. So it kind of makes you stop and think, what's this about? And then, you can learn about that and see how it's part of a bigger system. So yeah, different materials for the sidewalk. And we also are introducing this idea of some sort of sculptural overhead structure and striking element. So if we look at some of the other views, I think, it's important to, again, keep in mind this is still concept. And just because it's a red pole here doesn't mean necessarily that it has to be a red pole. But something that indicates this is a special place. There was a lot of thought that went into this design, and we want you to notice it and maybe be curious about it, especially as it is this gateway to the city.
I'm just curious though, what was sort of the design idea behind the red
Yeah,
poles?
yeah. So first of all, the way that it's currently set up, there's sort of these tunnel structures, and then there are the red poles. The design team thinks that that is probably too much. And there's a level, an iterative level of refinement and editing and curation that still has to happen, but we wanted to put everything out here to see what some reactions were. So they were done as reds, just to be bold and modern and, kind of striking and unique. But as I said, some of those other images that were presented earlier were the inspiration. So anything that relates to, feeding birds or catching the wind or maybe some sort of signage
I guess my
could be the
question is,
place of that.
The poles themselves, like, forget the color, just like, was there some, I don't know, what I'm curious about what the representation.
Yeah, well, I think, again, it was, the catalyst was the idea of movement.
Okay.
And so something that articulates that in a visual way.
And when you said a tunnel structure, I was thinking of this one that you showed over here.
Yeah.
Is that what this white thing is supposed to
Yeah,
be?
yeah, and these are representations.
Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a literal translation. But the diagrams that follow are really more kind of what we're thinking about. So this might start speaking to some of those questions that you have. On this diagram, you can see we're thinking about the movement of people. They're going on the sidewalk, they're going in and out, they're following those poles, and so it's highlighting that movement. They're primary modes of moving people through the space and secondary. So that starts to create a little bit more of a rich experience. The movement, go on.
Sorry, so just, from the other picture, it looked like this was like short, so this would be, go under. this
The idea
one.
was for it to be something that a pedestrian could experience, yeah. Or maybe it's some sort of play element that a child could discover.
And the distance between the poles are all wide enough that the person can fit right through there, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
And is this also for,
It's the runnel.
That's the water, that's the water channel.
And then the dark is the part where the
Yeah,
plants are,
so
the
if
biome.
you go to the diagram on the next page, that will, I think, illustrate that a little bit more clearly.
okay, great.
Yeah, you can see the movement of waters in the blue, and then where those little arrows are pointing to the green, that's indicating that it starts running into that adjacent rain garden. And so some of that filtration starts to happen.
Are there any guidance measures that you use, I'm sure there are, about scale to the size of a space? Because it's not a huge space, and when I think about the
Absolutely.
poles or the tunnel, just kind of thinking about
Absolutely.
what's the right scale for something.
And we have built a model, a digital model, and so that's a great way to start testing some scale issues and some perspective. There's also a great application of doing real-life mock-ups. You know, once we're actually at the point where we want to test something out, you go out in the field and you mock it up, so people can react to it and really understand the scale.
And I presume accessibility is not an issue with the size of where those things bisect the path.
Yeah, there would absolutely be an accessible path. Yeah, that's primary importance, because this space would be designed for everyone. And then another diagram talking a little bit more about how this could be a place of interaction and discovery. If there is a primary and secondary path, what connects those two paths? Maybe that's an opportunity for some sort of bridge going over the runnel, or just a change of materials that makes it an interesting, more rich experience.
That picture there looks like it's a different material, is that right?
Mhm.
Is it wood or something underneath?
It could be.
It could be.
Yeah, it could be. A lot of those details are still being cooked,
Okay.
but
So the
Yeah.
question I have, and it's kind of a side, but what kind of, I mean, do we have the budget for this? I mean, do we have a set amount of money that
No.
we're gonna come up with a plan and then we'll find the money? Okay.
and that's also why right now I was saying we're at the fun part. You know,
That
just
is
throw
fun. That
everything in
makes it
there.
real fun.
Throw everything in
So
there.
I just want to throw out one thing. I'm going to apply for grants.
Sure,
These
sure.
grants are.
I think I asked you this question last night.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to apply for grants, and could be one grant, could be, usually it's more than one grant, because at this point, we think it's gonna be $3.5 million.
Okay.
But it could be more,
Right.
so, depending on what you So, there are some restrictions in, basically, the goal is to apply to transportation-related grants. There is, depending on the grant,
I see.
there is the transportation grants fund about 10% of landscape.
Mm.
So if we have, but as I said, right now, we don't know the color of funding. We could be, if it's $3.5 million, we have 10% for landscape is $350,000, which actually can buy a landscape there. I don't know, if you guys know about any other grants.
I didn't mean to sidetrack us, I just.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I mean, that's, one idea is to have a plan that and we will, because this process is construction plans, you know, take it to construction delivery, ready, and everything. So, and then with that, apply for the whole project, why not? And then the other one is like, if you don't want to, this process to be a design, construction plan, then we can just at least, have the alignment of the sidewalk, and then you guys do whatever you want. I was thinking that it's an opportunity to fund it, you know, one way or another.
Yeah.
So, and to have something that is meaningful for the city. You know, funding is never easy in my world, so I don't know if in your world is something that you have, so I don't know. I mean, but as I said, it's going to be a really interesting project throughout, and if we can get it funded, we will get it funded. If the least we can do right now, we can actually we have funding for design, if you want to continue with us in the process.
Sure.
That's basically it.
Excellent.
Great, thank you.
So just to run through a few more of these images, just different perspectives to give you a sense of, you know, there'd be some spaces that would be more enclosed and protected by vegetation, so it changes the experience that one would have walking through the site. We didn't envision this to be the type, you know, anything like a formal plaza with tons of paving or lots of benches. Because given the place that it is, people aren't really going to be going there to sit for hours, you know? It's more about moving through the space and having an interesting time while you're doing it. There could be opportunities to create some interesting seat walls and retention walls so that there could be a comfortable place to stop. But we're not envisioning it to be, you know, any type of formal plaza or a sit-down with benches and tables and that sort of thing. So, and you could just flip through, these are just different views, again, to set tone and feeling of the space. But of course, a huge part of that will be the vegetation and the landscape. And we really envision something that could be colorful and bold, but it would absolutely have to be climate appropriate and drought tolerant. We'd envision being able to integrate a lot of natives into the design, but also have it be a place for pollinators and lots of bees and hummingbirds, and allow this space to become just a bit softer. So through really, a vegetation palette that is, you can't say foolproof because it's never foolproof, but lower maintenance, drought tolerant, climate appropriate, and attracting pollinators would be really ideal. So that was a fairly quick overview of our concept to this point. And as I said, we envision this being an informal conversation where we could hear some of your thoughts or comments or concerns before we go to the next step of the process.
Well, the only thing I wanted to say was that because of all the automobile traffic, it is a very loud space now. And so I realize you've done a tremendous amount with planting and vegetation, which should tone that down a bit. Anything that can be done with the hard spaces that are remaining, the pole surfaces, the surface of the structures, and the paving itself, to continue toning that down, I think would be beneficial. But you probably knew that. But that's really all I had to say, because I think going through this, I think the water will help, produce some white noise that, when it is raining or storming there. But I just think that would be I can imagine that being the biggest negative.
Sure.
Is the noise.
Yeah, and I think that was a driver for having some really bold sculptural elements at the site, so it would sort of be able to compete with that and counterbalance that, even if it's just psychologically. Because it's not really a pleasant place for people, especially right now. The way that the sidewalk kind of comes in and out is it doesn't bring you right next to the traffic, also creates a sense and a psychological barrier.
Well, I think this would be a great project if funding can be found to really help Albany to be even better than it is. So it's great.
Excellent.
I'm curious about the grade, and maybe this is more technical than we need to do right now, but it seems like this is intended to be pretty much the same level as the street. Then clearly it goes down. Is that the current grade, or would that be?
There are some
I'm not that familiar
existing,
with it.
grade changes. Since we will be dealing with stormwater, that will be a huge consideration.
Sure.
But we can sculpt the land, especially if we're talking about minor.
I understand, yeah.
So, we have some leeway to be creative and have the land do what we want it to be able to host the amenities that we want it to host.
Sure.
But the larger project that we're working on, we are the planners and designers. We're working with engineers, civil engineers, traffic engineers. So there's a whole technical side.
And I wasn't trying to imply I wouldn't be able to hear it. I'm just trying to conceptualize.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're getting into the site. So
the thing that bothers me about the poles is my son skateboards, and I just see it as headbanging opportunities. Little kids on bikes.
Sure.
They scare me. I like them. I like the look. I like what it does for the site, but they scare me too. So I think they need to be foam.
Everything should be safety surface
Well, that will
material.
help with the noise.
It'd help. See, I was thinking it would help with the sound.
It's all going to come together. Absolutely.
Well, right now, it's just a concept.
Yeah.
So that can be determined. There's so many different possibilities. They could turn into something much softer and a sort of wooden element. Maybe I know that Albany's starting to do a lot of stuff with reclaimed wood, especially along the Loney Greenway. I see all these huge trunks of trees that are being repurposed. So there could be a really artful way to integrate something like that. But let's see what other images.
I guess my reaction is that you're walking along there, you've got a lot of the noise of the street
Yeah.
and cars zooming by. And to me, the red and the zigzag is pretty edgy. And so, you know, my superficial reaction last month was if there was something blue and, as you say, softer. And the blue or something to kind of accentuate the water that's going through there.
Yeah.
So that's a real different kind of feeling than Albany's an edgy, happening place, and I don't know which Albany we want to create here as our entry. But,
Absolutely.
my kids, who are no longer kids, just got overwhelmed so easily that, you know, sensory overload. So.
Yeah. Well, and I've been thinking a lot more about this project lately, and perhaps something even, you know, some sort of very durable fabric that might catch the wind and could be a variety of colors or softer colors, or it could be more about waves and that type of movement. It could be more about, you know, from the hills down to the bay, maybe there's an arc to it. So I think there's a lot of possibility.
That's kind of what I had been thinking was, I feel differently about I actually am one of those people that probably likes the bold, modern aspect of it, but I think there's a lot happening with the tunnel and that, and I also feel like for me it's different if it has meaning. So if there's a meaning to those, the height of those elements because they relate to something else, or if it's something to do with the water or then I feel like it's educational and there's this kind of hidden thing to discover about the park, as opposed to just kind of more based on the visual, you know, randomness of the red.
And as a place for discovery and a sort of node, it really is a turning point where you do have behind you the hills and in front of you the bay. And, you know, a lot of people that are cycling down there or even driving down there, you know, that's kind of a turning point in the landscape. So I think to highlight that in a sculptural way could be really powerful. But having something with a little bit more context could be appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, I really like the idea of experiential sculpture being integrated. I hear Todd's point though, but that was, to me, it was just, sorry, I just have to say I wasn't a big fan of it aesthetically, but then I also did see it as like, it seems like a barrier somehow. It seems like it's somehow an obstacle, ADA, I don't know what, but now Todd's bringing up this other thing, like little kid on a tricycle or something.
Yeah.
Teetering.
Yeah, and so that, to me, that combined with the fact that I wasn't a big fan.
In that image up there, it does sort of look like it bisects the path down the middle. So it, like when I first looked at it, I was like, it does look like in part of it maybe, you know, it blocks you from the bridge, or a wheelchair would have trouble. And obviously that wouldn't be the case, but that's how it sort of came across to me.
Yeah.
In that sort of bisecting way a little bit.
And the idea was for it to be playful. Some would be closer together, some would be further apart. You could kind of weave your way through it. It would echo the meandering path. But certainly a level of refinement that softens it or makes it feel a little bit more friendly.
You know,
Could
I
be
think it's one of those
appropriate.
things that's just like, I haven't seen it out there in
Yeah.
the real world, and I think if I experienced it maybe somewhere, I'm like, yes, this is so cool.
The
So
other
it's
thing
just-
is turning it from red to stainless steel could make a tremendous difference.
Right.
Or turning it to some fewer stainless steel with some sort of, again in Dolores Park, I keep on talking about Dolores Park, but they have these sound kind of instruments, and they're kind of like poles, and you can just bang them a little bit. So then it becomes something that you stop and you engage with.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I don't know if the neighbors would like it.
They're not, compared to the traffic next,
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
true,
it's-
that's true.
Well, that's easy for you to say.
Yeah,
So-
that high-pitched noise may be different than the flow of traffic, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
Okay.
I want to say also, I really like, you know, sort of this landscaping
Yeah,
concept.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Great, excellent.
Especially where you can see the color too. I love the
So I have two
image that
thoughts
has
on
the
the poles,
purple.
I'm sorry. before
Oh,
we
yeah,
go away from
yeah,
the
because
poles,
I'd
if I
love to
may.
hear more about
So-
trees and vegetation if you have
Yeah,
thoughts.
real quick, so one thing, I like the idea of the poles having a contour, and I think it'd be cool if it would reflect the contour of Albany Hill.
Yeah.
Might be kind of interesting, and also if you banged on it, it'd be different tones. And then you would lose some of the interactivity, but if it was a hazard on the walkway, it could be pushed up onto the tree area
Yeah.
there. That way the kids could get up and enjoy and run around in it, but you're not just gonna accidentally run your bike into
Yeah.
it. You do lose a lot of the interactivity though, I understand
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But if we wanted to keep that feature without
Yeah. I know my kids love playing with and running through bicycle parking loops. But what they do is they run up to it and then they stop. And they kind of go under it or try to climb around it. So it actually might be somewhat of a traffic calmer for children.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
because they're able to stop and discover and connect and interact. But if it's right next to a road and they're running to it, it still gives you a reason to be concerned.
Yeah.
But in my experience, that is what happens a lot. It's a run to it and then stop and, hey, what is this? Can I climb on it?
And I think the skateboards and the bicycles are maybe more of an issue of running into it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If it's a crowd, if it's crowded on the path, and that's hard to see the scale, like how much space really is there between the pole and the edge there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, ideally, if it's someone who really wants to get someplace quickly, they'll be on the bicycle path across the street, because that's a much better place for faster traffic.
The only thing I would say though is like our 7 9 I don't know how many we were, 7, we all kind of had that reaction of like, oh.
Yeah.
And so it's just good for you to hear that.
Absolutely.
It's not, we're not the entire public, but just to recognize that there was that reaction. And that, you know, I know you can get attached to design as the designer, but just to know that that was our,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would also point out that this back wall would be great for grinding on the skateboards too. So. And I really am opposed to putting things to keep people from grinding, because they're going to be using the space, but the poles will be in.
Yeah.
You mean you go on the wall?
You know, when they jump up on the
do
skateboard,
that,
it's slide along the side.
That's like a perfect little
It's
spot.
perfect.
And there are design tricks to
I know there
deal
are,
with that.
but I don't like those
Texture
things.
on top of it, so.
You could put different textures and, yeah.
My story about that, and I told this story for the project before, is my son, when he was 6, was running along something and hit that and smashed his head over. So those things are a problem. That's why I like things that go down rather than things that come up, but that's just.
I wonder, two things that you've mentioned. One is if it was a different color and perhaps there were fewer of them, maybe looking at the positioning, whether people would respond differently to, because I think also I heard people very clearly say red last time, and I think that's just like a, on the other hand, so are, you know, big sculptural things are oftentimes red because people notice it. But the other thing is you mentioned reclaimed wood. And I've seen some really nice things, I want to say like on the High Line in New York, that are using wood, and it has a very different feeling. Like it makes you feel like you're in a little special space instead of having that striking feeling. But this is so beautiful and natural, and maybe there'd be some more reaction to something that's more using that type of material.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, what's hard is like I'd love to see a picture of that here somehow.
Yeah.
Because I'm not getting it, I'm still not totally getting it, and I don't want us to be an experiment. Do you know what I mean? If it fails, you know what I'm saying? So like if it was tested and tried out somewhere else.
So to see more imagery about something that had a softer, more
Yeah, or
reclaimed
even like if it happened to
nature.
be somewhere in the Bay Area, so
Yeah.
like I could go to it and experience it, you know? And so
Absolutely.
that's the only thing I'm really hesitant about. I see it in these pictures, I can't imagine it, and, you know, then I feel like Little Albany's an experiment for, you know, that design, so.
And we wouldn't want it to feel experimental or undercooked. And I think something to be very mindful of when incorporating reclaimed and recycled materials is you still want it to look crafted and thoughtful. You don't just want it to look like
Sure.
the junkyard,
That's
you
right.
know?
Totally.
So that would definitely have to be specific and, well, just thoughtful.
Right.
How about the letters? I heard last time that you guys like the letters as well.
I love that.
If
If
you
that's in
like
like
that,
Albany or
yeah.
something like that, I think that would be really
And
nice.
that could even
I like that
be
you can see it at night. I like that this is lit
Yeah,
up.
or there can be no poles and it could be letters, you know?
Yeah,
it's-
yeah.
Yeah.
So
That
everyone
feels
seems
modern,
to like
right?
the letters.
I know that some of those letters could be somewhat interactive if kids can climb on that.
Okay, climb on the
right?
letters and then, can it be Albany or
Right, that's what it is. Isn't that
No,
that's somewhere else?
it should be Berkeley.
No, whatever, because
Halfway to
it can be like,
Kensington.
you know, we love everybody or something like
Oh, I
that.
see.
Right, some other phrase or something.
But I was thinking, Albany, you know, it's like a welcome to Albany type of thing. I don't know.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, absolutely.
That's,
So I had originally been imagining this would be in the median, so that when you were driving, you'd see it, but you're thinking this would be potentially in the actual park as a sculptural element going along there. Oh,
In
neat.
terms of sight lines and traffic and safety, having stuff next to, instead of in the middle of.
That's
is
great, I hadn't
generally-
even thought of that, so.
And the median is a little bit control.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's just somehow the way that it looked here with the trees, I was thinking that's what it was, but,
So you're all reacting positively to that.
We like it
And
either way.
a color that's bold like the orange still seems like it fits, and it's,
Well, Albany has, I mean, green is Albany's color, I mean, right, I mean, it's,
Green and.
to the degree it has a color.
Actually, there's a gold that is part of Albany's original color in the seal, and then there's green, and we have black. But we've incorporated some other new colors.
Sure.
You see, a little bit of blue, orange.
along the greenway is some of the art that's going in there yellow.
I can't remember the final color. but
Okay.
The proposed blue, the blue.
Yeah.
blue was,
We can
yellow.
send you the hues, the actual.
Yeah. And, you know, there could be value in having it echoed, but it might want to be its own
Right.
thing
over
too.
there too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We
Where the
talked
pancake
about-
breakfast sign goes.
No, that sign is that's, okay, so this is the firehouse, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where they put whatever's happening, like
Yeah.
night out or,
It's actually, we're doing a little
And-
project here.
Yeah.
yeah,
So, why don't we
so not
just-
there. It would be
This,
somewhere.
yeah,
over
try
here.
not to look at that too much because that's also being redesigned a bit.
Oh, this white, this part?
The
The
part
little
that's
part,
right
the big
next
piece.
to,
This is a fire department, we designed
yeah.
it. So they're working on it.
And we've just got,
Maybe 3 more minutes?
yeah, and I took us off the plants, we wanted to talk about.
Oh,
plants
yeah,
a little bit,
if,
so we can-
since, you know, Park and Rec, if you guys
I
have.
love it all.
Okay, good.
Okay,
So-
done.
Are you a gardener?
No, I am not, but I appreciate looking at things that look like that and are drought tolerant and native.
Yeah,
That's exciting.
I agree.
And pollinators.
It
That's-
checks
I think
all
you
the
said- You said
boxes.
the good
Okay.
things.
You said all the key things that people
And
want.
also, I would advocate for tall tree canopy trees.
Canopies.
You know?
But that's overall, you want that.
Yeah, for sure.
For the median.
In the median, wherever, yeah, wherever the
That's
tree
also on
is.
San Pablo Avenue, that's what they said last time. So
Yeah, and that, stuff like that helps with.
The part in
traffic
here?
calming
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and just psychologically,
back along
some
here.
noise filtration, even if it's not
But we
quite
have
decibel.
medians to do up now.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that would be great to have it shaded by just pine trees.
And
right?
shade, yeah, absolutely.
But these bold colors here,
Yeah,
this
that's
is
very
great.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Minas have irrigation, so we can put some plants that actually.
Mm-hmm.
Are these the
Yeah,
poles?
they do.
Are these the poles?
Those are other, yeah, so these are all those are different, yeah, different
This is
concept of
somewhere-
poles.
This is.
These are, yeah, these are all precedent images.
Do you know if that's local in the Bay Area, that blue pole?
I'm not sure I could find out. I'm not sure exactly where that image is, but it made it into the, oh yeah, this is cool, that's feeling right, let's put that in
Because
there.
this, the only thing I'll say one more thing on that is, this to me just feels like the scale of this park is so much bigger, like that this is a big urban plaza.
Yeah.
And so I react very differently to this because it feels like you're supposed to get the immensity of that space
Sure.
and then it's,
Yeah,
whereas this is still a relatively small
It's more
space, and
intimate.
so maybe, I don't, that's why I was asking the question about scale, but.
Without being a person that is a park person, you know, or landscape, yeah, I think the alignment of the path is really interesting in itself. That might not need the poles. That's,
Yeah, I would say that if I had to choose between the little covered area and the poles, I would probably choose the covered area.
yeah, the
yeah.
cover area is fine.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you want to move the cover area to where the poles are and have your letters play out with the, what it looks like a wooden path there, you know, the Albany, whatever, there, aligning on the wooden path, and move the aerial structures to the center of the main, I don't know if that's the main, no, it's not the main, it's one of the sidewalks on the north side, I would say. That's something that I can see.
yeah. And can I gauge the temperature of the kind of tunnel area versus the letters?
No, that's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
we're
So-
saying keep the tunnel, right?
Keep the tunnel.
But if you,
Well, but
but
if
if
we
it
had to
was
choose-
to come down to one, like what resonates the most with you?
I think so the letters wouldn't be in lieu of the red poles, the letters would be in lieu of the tunnel.
We're
And
just
we're kind of doing
saying,
all,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
all
kind
three of
of,
them, yeah.
I love the letters, but I feel like, yeah, I'll just say that.
I think the letters, if they could be very playful, I think that could be
Playful
a
letters.
nice feature.
I'm wondering, but the letter, it looks like the letters might be too small. I mean, Albany's a pretty long word, I guess, but.
I'm not totally clear where they would go.
There would be some edges that wouldn't have the Albany, obviously, like center.
I was thinking of the letters here, maybe.
I'm just saying,
That's a
I
design.
would vote for the
I
top.
was thinking of the letters around here, so the kids can actually access the letters there.
Yeah.
And this thing, the area structure here, because,
Moving that.
yeah, moving that, because I don't, last time when I was here, I didn't see a lot of support for the poles, but
Yeah.
could change.
I was
Just-
thinking
just
of
to
it
get
for the
back to
driving, that's why.
The
but-
letters, to me, you know, when you're driving on MLK next to Bart, and you
Yeah.
have those letters along there, I really don't care for that. To me, it's just, it isn't something to interact with, but that tunnel looked like it could be fun.
I think the tunnel's cool. I think the tunnel's cool where it's at too. I mean,
Yeah, I do too.
But I just, there's something about like going like off the path. That's just,
It makes that side thing kind of special.
yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with the different, whatever the material is of the path itself.
Right.
Looking more wood and somehow.
just to put this out there, because I know we are needing to wrap up soon, but another consideration for the poles and the tunnel and the scale of everything is that a lot of people are passing this quickly in a car. So just to make sure that it's understood and perceivable at that speed.
A lot of people are sitting there for a long time, too.
That's true.
True.
Well, to me, we're still we should be focusing on the kids going through at their pace rather than the cars.
Well, I think the letters serve both purposes, because they're to be read by the cars, I think, and the
Yeah.
kids.
No, I think the right thing is to design for both.
And I think when you,
To include the letters in their section.
Well, there's that too.
I think when you opened it, you were saying like this is a gateway plaza for people that are coming from the freeway. So that's the treatment I was thinking of that thing at MLK, and I do like that. But I'm from the Instagram generation of like, you know, I love you so much, or tacos, or whatever people take the pictures. I think it's like a photo moment, you know, that kind of becomes a defining thing for this community. But I also was envisioning it not in competition with those things, so I don't really know.
Right. Yeah. no,
We want everything, that's it.
Yeah,
I would
I
say
know, right?
one last,
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, if we're gonna be having something that serves as kind of like welcome to Albany, and maybe that would go here, but as somebody who's been involved in many, I know, I'm just saying, not
That's
for me
not
to
a-
say,
yeah.
just whatever, somebody who's been involved in many organizations, I like it, you know, it's a traditional city, has the plaques of the different organizations that meet, where the Rotary meets. and-
I was asked that question, you know, what is the organization?
But that may not be for here, that could be,
Right, so send me an email, how about that? Yeah,
okay,
because
Okay, I'm putting in the,
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
I want to remind you that Harriet is going to be the representative to the TAC, so if we have any more comments we want to send through.
Absolutely. I can leave these here. Yeah. And again, they're concept, so, yeah, thank you.
the commission will more details.
Thank you, Jessica, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Very much. Take care. Good luck.
So now we call to order, right? Okay, so I'm calling to order, and the first item is approval of action minutes from last month, October 12th.
I'm happy to move acceptance of the action minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, nobody is abstained. Okay, the next item is public comment for anybody who wants to address an item that's not on the agenda. No, I don't think so. Okay, so fourth item, director's report.
I just have a few items for you guys tonight. Announcements. We will be doing the opening ceremony for the Ohlone Greenway project that the Parks and Rec Commission has worked very hard on over the past 75 years. That opening will be November 15th, which is next week, and it will be at 5:30. It will be a little bit dark, but we will have lighting. The Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park is getting close to completion. We have one remaining item at the bathrooms, which is PG&E. They've been redirected up to our neighbors in the north after the fires. A few benches to come in with a memorial plaque. We want to make sure those get in place before we do the opening. But we are trying to shoot for that to happen mid-December, if possible. We want that to open and get kids out there playing as soon as we can. Dartmouth Tot Lot, a lot of work has happened over there. It's almost complete in terms of the fencing part with the bottle filling station, and we're just waiting for the bottle filler to arrive, and it should be here at the end of November. So I anticipate that going in at the beginning of December, and that will be, I believe, Albany's first bottle filling station of its kind where anybody can kind of walk up and fill a bottle. So those are my updates for you.
Thanks. Okay, item 5.1, street tree removal
I
application.
think if I could interrupt, I think Sue wanted to have an announcement also about.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention this East Bay Mud, I guess it's a presentation that is open to the public, so anybody, including us, could attend. It's Monday at 3:30. If you Google this, then you can find the slides from the presentation that is going to be made. And just to cut to the chase, the coastal regions of California and the street trees that grow here will be much less impacted than the inland, hotter parts of California.
I see.
They are going to have virtually all of their currently, top use trees will not be able to grow in 30-ish years. Berkeley was one of their study sites, and most of the Berkeley trees will continue to grow okay. So that was kind of a relief and maybe takes the pressure off for us to attend this, but it's real interesting.
You planning to attend?
Probably I cannot.
Okay.
But, anyway, John, I'll give you a copy of this too. You probably know most of this anyway, but.
Okay, thanks. Item 5.1, street tree removal application for 944 Standage Avenue.
We reviewed this a couple months ago, and we didn't come up with a solution at that point.
Is it on? It's on now. Okay. So I took this back to Public Works, and I talked with the director and the sidewalk repair project people to see if we could come up with a solution for this. And I think basically when we first reviewed this, we felt that my recommendation was to deny the removal application because the tree, it's a healthy tree. And I feel that the sidewalk can be repaired again and the tree can survive. So we came up with a possible solution. A proposal for the commission would be to deny the removal of the tree, but ask the Public Works sidewalk, I don't know if we have a specific name for the sidewalk program, to push this location up in the priority list. So we have on the screen there's the priority. Right now the location is in Group C because there is an offset of more than 2 inches. There's about a 4-inch lift on the sidewalk due to the tree. I propose that the recommendation be to move it up to Group A, which is, what did I say? What we talked about for this is that since the tree meets the criteria for Group C, but also the property owner has replaced the sidewalk within the last 10 years, and it meets the Group C, it's offset more than 2 inches, that we move it up to Group A, which is special needs, which is generally locations where there's accessibility issues, as wheelchairs or something on the street. So I'm not sure if there is on this street, but this it doesn't meet Group B, which is ATP, which is, are streets like Solano and where there's school zones. But it's a block off of Solano, but it's not necessarily one of the main thoroughfares. So I think Public Works would be willing to consider moving it up to Group A for special needs. So what we need is a recommendation from the commission to do that.
And if I could add to John's report, in working with staff, the Director of Public Works, with the sidewalk repair program and trying to bridge the tree removal application, this was what we think could be a process that will be included in the street tree removal policy when we tackle that in December. Is this using the criteria? This is the criteria that Traffic and Safety developed in terms of determining the need for the sidewalk to be replaced and how quickly or what the urgency of it is. And the criteria that street trees that have a tree conflict that come before us, where the homeowner has already replaced the sidewalk once, which is in our policy, our current policy, they would have to have done it within 10 years of replacing. And then the homeowner would actually, and the commission would like to keep the tree. So if those things get met and the application is denied, it's also over the 2-inch threshold of lift, that you could recommend that it gets moved to A, the Group A. So the real key here is that they've already paid for it once before to replace the sidewalk. It's been within 10 years, so the tree is an offender, basically, and that they actually want to keep the tree. And that's what moves them up in the priority. You're not going to keep the tree's dead, you haven't replaced your sidewalk, or even if you have, you can get placed into Group C, and Public Works will evaluate the sidewalk based on their criteria.
But I have a question, though, because you say if you don't want to keep the tree, but even if you don't want to keep the tree, or that still has to come before our commission, so it's not to say, I'm just a little confused about that, because you wouldn't be coming, if you wanted to keep the tree, you wouldn't necessarily be coming to
Yeah,
us
so
at all.
Parks and Rec is deciding that that tree is important, and this is where you got stuck, I think, last time, is that you actually probably, you realized the tree was healthy, and then it came out that actually we like the tree, but
Right.
it's tearing apart our sidewalk. So you'd be denying an application to remove the tree. If it comes before and it's some other removal, and you're saying, yes, it should be removed, the sidewalk will move into the normal criteria.
Oh, I see. If it's not, right, okay, that's a different, I see what you're saying.
This gives us another solution to say we can make
Right.
it more likely we'll pay for your sidewalk repair, basically, I think.
Yeah, it's not intended to be a shortcut to get to the top of the list.
Yes.
But it is an effort to retain street trees that are healthy
Right,
and
and the interesting
valuable,
trees, yeah.
and people actually really like. And they've already replaced their sidewalk, so it kind of falls into our plan. So this is a pathway that we can use to incorporate our tree removal policy into the sidewalk repair program. You know, we have a little bit of a backlog in sidewalk repairs because they're working out this program, but soon this is just going to be rolling through. There'll be batches of these sidewalks getting taken care of, so it won't be quite a delay that we're having right now as we get it started.
So can we understand then, we can actually make that recommendation, right? We have this approval from DPW, right, to actually make the recommendation that they be moved to the top of the list?
Yes, well, Group A,
Group A.
for the item that we're talking about right now, 944 Stanage, this is the recommended path forward if you choose to deny the application. if you choose to approve the application to remove the tree, you feel like this tree is just in the wrong spot or one of those, they will get sent over, Public Works will evaluate them. They're already in Group C, and
So
the
they'll
sidewalk will be
remain in
kind of-
Group C, and they, okay.
Yes.
So, but,
And then the greater part of having the whole discussion about how this marries into our tree removal process, we'll want to talk about more in depth in December.
and so we're essentially both denying the removal, but then also recommending this up to the, okay, okay.
There's a note that says approximately 8 per year. Can you speak to that?
I can. We typically have, of regular just tree removal applications, between probably 10 and 12 that are the regular ones. We'll have more if we've had a park one or a Loney Greenway, we took out other trees for those things. But typically it's about 10 to 12 of just residents coming. This is a guesstimate that if we had 8 a year of the special circumstances, that it would be fine. But if it went over that, then we'd have to reevaluate the proposal. But that was about my approximate guess on how many per year we could see. If it's less, great.
One more question. I know it's new and it's, still working this out, but how far down the list are they going to get every year? I mean, are they going to get all the way through A, B, and into C in a year, or is it more likely they get halfway through A, so it's going to be 4 years before anything happens anyway?
It's a good
I
amount.
don't know if there's an answer to that, yeah.
Yeah, there's not a
There's not an
answer
answer to
to that because the list is always changing. But right now, Group A has about 3 locations.
Okay,
So they'd be in
so
the
that's,
at least the top 10 by the
Okay,
time
okay.
things get moving, yeah.
that helps, thank you.
And it's really ATP is the priority right now, is the highest priority ones. Active Transportation Plan is ATP.
Oh, I see, so these aren't necessarily order priority, they're just groups? Okay, okay.
It is
You can
listed
see how
that
we
way.
might
Yeah,
think
it's
that.
listed that way, yeah, you're right.
A, B, C, there's an order there.
Oh, yeah, that's what I thought too. Wait, so does that mean though, but you're saying if they go
No,
to
it is a
Group
special,
A-
it's a high priority. A is a high priority.
so it is the highest priority.
So they're making
The
it-
first ones are A, that
It's
will get
making
serviced.
yes, the big batch of them are Bs.
Right.
There are a few special cases, they're calling them access needs, where there's been identified an access issue either for someone in a wheelchair getting to a
Right.
push
No,
a button
gotcha.
or doing
So
something.
there's not that many of those, but you can't, but that doesn't mean there's not a lot before C, because Group B is this huge number because of the active transportation plan, Solano, Marin, okay. Anybody else have any questions? No? Okay, so now we're opening up to public comment.
Yes.
So do you want to come to any public comment? You don't have to. You don't have to if you don't want to. The only other, I would say, one thing we got was the emails from neighbors that we told didn't have to show up. And, this is maybe just more of a process question is, I've noticed that we haven't necessarily read those emails in the past, but I think that's kind of meaningful if we want to. I don't know if we want to this time, if there's not going to be a discussion, but I just
Read
wanna
them
say-
aloud?
Yeah, to read them aloud, because otherwise their voices aren't heard within this meeting, and maybe if commissioners didn't get a chance to read them, and they're not in the packet.
Yeah, that was my fault for not getting them actually in the packet, because I'd received them a while ago. So then I made sure that you guys got them in an email format. They're on the back table, and so
Okay.
they could be read, and actually they were very sweet.
Yeah, they were very sweet.
Both in favor of keeping the tree was,
Yeah, both, yeah.
It was a
both in
lovely
favor.
poem.
There was a poem too, so I don't know if you guys saw that,
I
but,
did see the poem, yes.
okay. So,
so in future, when I get them before the packet goes out, they should be in your packet, so everybody.
well, that's one thing. There's the other, just to read them,
Sure.
because we're offering people to not have to come because their voices will be heard, but if not everybody is hearing their voice, I think in this case, maybe if we can just move along.
And sometimes they're quite long. I would
Yes.
not want to commit to reading all the emails.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's completely up to you. As a
Okay.
chair, you can decide to make sure.
I would just say, I just want to put on the record that 2 neighbors emailed and both were in favor of keeping the tree. Okay.
And one wrote a poem.
What?
And
And one wrote a poem. Yes, exactly. Okay, so, discussion.
I feel like the plan as proposed makes sense to me. And this seems like a good structure for navigating a sort of backlog of trees to be addressed. It sounds like there's a process by which the homeowner will, have a way to have that repair done more expeditiously.
Maybe I should have asked this question, but John, did we, when the sidewalk gets repaired, that includes, when the city does it, that includes like trimming the roots, right? That's all city, that's part of what the funds go to, tree root
Yeah, for
pruning?
the
Okay.
sidewalk project, yes.
Okay. I just want to say, I had a chance to talk with Mark and Shelley about this when I went to the soda tax meeting. And Mark, and I think this is a really potentially great strategy for us because we've had this weird conflict of like telling people no when they still have to pay for things. And I just want to give Shelley great acknowledgement for figuring this out with Mark. And I think when I talked with them, it was clear that they were really happy because this was a potential real solution. And we needed Mark, we needed DPW to be involved. So I just want to acknowledge that. But the other thing the reason I asked that question about the root pruning is that Mark was making the good point that when we require residents to repair the sidewalks on their own, sometimes they're not doing the root pruning correctly. And that could actually cause more chance of sidewalk lift in the future. So he was saying like if the root gets trimmed but the canopy doesn't, it just creates all kinds of awkward. Anyway, John, maybe you can speak to that.
I think that might be the case here, that roots weren't properly pruned or not enough, or the sidewalk was ramped up over roots, it looks like a little bit. There was some pruning, there's some evidence of pruned roots, but the key here again is they've done the repair within the last 10 years. And generally, if roots are properly pruned and the sidewalk is laid correctly, the correct thickness, and you wouldn't have that problem within 10 years. So this is an unusual situation.
I see.
So I don't really see that, they're saying we expect up to 8 per year. I don't see that many really happening.
Right.
That either the sidewalk hasn't been repaired or the tree needs to come out or.
Well, and the 2 inches, there's a lot of things that need to be checked off, so I don't see 8 happening.
Yeah, but this does
This one fits.
give us an option for when we do have a case like this, specific one at least, so.
And the other thing to note that everybody that goes through this sidewalk repair program and has a sidewalk replaced, they are getting a formal certificate from the city of Albany. It says, we've replaced this once, now it's back to you. I mean, and later in our discussion, we'll talk about responsibilities of sidewalks and whose responsibility it is and liability. So this is a one-time deal.
I would like also to thank the homeowner for, the patience in allowing us to work toward what hopefully is a solution.
I think they were interested in approaching. Did you want to come speak? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. We're really excited to keep the tree, actually. We just didn't know it could be kept and that this was available. So my mom had a question, and I believe that the root pruning at the time was done by the city. So I don't know if it was done incorrectly or I don't know, but I think the city came out to do that. But now that it's lifting so much, where it meets the driveway, and I know the driveway is the responsibility of the property owner, if you stop where the driveway begins, there's going to be a huge lift there. So what happens there? Do you just literally stop where the sidewalk is supposed to stop because it's the tree's roots that are lifting?
So
how do we address that?
Yeah, Public Works has a consultant that will come out, and they'll, once this gets put into their list, they actually photograph it, they draw out the plan for it, and so you'll be working with Public Works at that point.
Okay, because it's a large area. It's just not just, it doesn't just stop right there. That was the question. Okay, thank you. Oh, is there any place where we're going to be able to see the poem? I think that's so sweet.
Oh,
Thank you. So does anybody else have any comments? We have a motion?
Oh, I move that we deny the application. What should the motion be to move it up to Group A?
You would deny the application, the street tree removal application, and recommend that this sidewalk be moved to Group A.
So I have one more comment about this. I'm very uncomfortable about using Group A for something it isn't specifically titled for. So that I know that, I just want to be clear that it should say special access needs and emergency tree, something like that, because otherwise, suddenly these groups become very fluid and.
This is, well, no, this is the proposed,
know it's
this is the criteria that traffic and safety has developed, so we're following their terminology, and
I'll
this
talk to
is
Ken
the
about that.
spot that they felt that it best fits.
Second.
Okay, so we're seconding the, but I think Todd did have a question about how, so the motion is
So
deny application and,
do we need, it's the first time we've done this. So we deny the application with the understanding that this project will be moved into, this sidewalk repair will be moved into Group A prioritization, something like that?
okay.
Recommend, maybe, that it be moved? Isn't that how you phrased it, Shelley?
Yes, it is, you're denying the street tree removal, so that the tree stays, and you're recommending that this sidewalk repair be placed in Group A in the sidewalk repair program.
Okay.
You can just say yes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so item 5.2, street tree removal application, 744 Pomona Avenue.
Thank you again for coming down.
Thanks.
We're happy you'll be able to keep your tree.
Yeah.
Um, 744 Pomona, the property owner applied for removal of one camphor tree. And this is the tree. It's in decline. It's, there's some, it seems kind of sudden, the decline here. The form of the tree is good, but there's barely any leaves, there's no new growth. And there's a lot of dead branches, a lot of dying back branches too. There's just a picture showing there's high voltage power lines overhead, although it's hard to say whether PG&E actually ever got to pruning the tree. I don't think it got that high to where they did any pruning that caused the decline in the tree. Sidewalk has been repaired, curved out. The tree is filling the space already that was created for it. Lifting, this wasn't really the concern of the property owner, that it's lifting the sidewalk. It's a concern, but not the reason they applied to remove the tree. Here's another view on the other side where there's at least a 2-inch Class C sidewalk here. That's another angle. I'm pushing out the curb a couple inches. See that? And again, a lot of thinning in the crown, a lot of dead branches and some dead limbs in there. Too far.
So, when I went out and looked at this, I talked to the property.
I talked to the property owner, and down the side of his house, there's several smaller trees that have suddenly died also. And there's an oak tree in the backyard that has a lot of dead patches in it. And he's looking into whatever that is, but it's either something in the soil, underground water flow, too much water, or a gas leak or something, a gas line it could be. So hopefully he's having that all checked out. But I don't think this tree is going to come back. I've been looking at this for months. I've been driving. It's where, Portland kind of zigzags across Pomona. And you stop at the stop sign and look to the left, and there's this tree that just has been looking really poorly for a long time. So my recommendation is to approve the removal.
I'm just curious about when would it ever come back? Is there ever a chance for it to come back? Like what kind of, I'm just curious.
Well, it wouldn't. I mean, a lot of the camphors are drought stressed. There's a lot of dieback, but there's also a lot of lush growth still in the canopy. The entire canopy is just
Yeah.
fading away pretty quickly, so.
I went by and looked at it today, and especially in comparison to the camphor trees also on that block, this is a very ill tree. And I am not a tree expert, but one of the things I noticed in the slides that were associated with the East Bay Mud Talk next week was an image of the roots compared to the tree. And there's this idea that the roots match the shape of the tree, and that is not true. The roots tend to go out way beyond the canopy of the tree, and they're relatively shallow. And you look at this tree and many street trees, there isn't a lot of space for the roots to get water. And so I think as the drought comes and goes, we're going to lose a lot of trees. And, you know, possibly that's what's going on here compared to the ones that are so healthy. So just a thought, but my recommendation is to take it down.
Well, like I said, a lot of the camphors are stressed, but the 944 is one of the nicest ones. That's why I denied that. That one doesn't show too much effect of the drought, but this I think is something beyond the drought. I mean, it would have been a beautiful tree. It's got beautiful form, you know, for a camphor, even though it's pushing out the sidewalk and the curb.
It used to be a beautiful tree.
It used to be a beautiful tree, and I think we're not going to see anything much out of this tree anymore. So.
This may be out of turn. It perhaps should go at a different point in the meeting, but is there any active education for homeowners about tree care that happens through you right now? I'm just thinking, I've been here for a number of years, and we even put in some of our own street trees, and I just don't recall getting that, noticing anything like that. Should that go at the end?
It can go under 6.1.
Okay.
Save it. Good question.
I'm going to move that we approve the application, remove the tree at,
No public comment?
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
We'll move on, yeah, we're already.
I'm already going to move. I don't think we need to spend much more time.
I second.
Yeah,
All in favor?
aye.
Discussion 6.1. Or item 6.1, city street tree roles and responsibilities. And this was, I think okay, so city's urban forestry was discuss roles and responsibilities. Just so you know, John, this came, I think you weren't here when we started this conversation wanting to learn more. And I think this idea of roles and responsibilities is which department does what, because it does seem kind of odd that we're doing street trees.
And if I can give you just an little intro for John on this one. Yeah, I was gonna be like, I'm gonna do a little dance for you. Is that city staff and John especially is working on that overall tree policy I think we mentioned, and we're still working through a number of pieces of that. The Parks and Rec Commission portion of it is the street tree removals that will be folded into this larger policy that will also have sidewalks, planting, maintenance, all those things. So John's actually been working through this with staff recently. So at some point you'll see fuller, thing come to you. But we had great questions from Commissioner Millers about this, and we've had it during other commission meetings. So we thought, well, let's just go for it and talk about a few of them at least.
Okay, so developing a street tree policy that covers everything, covers from planting, maintenance, removal, replacement. Basically, the driver behind it is Municipal Code 14-1.4. It's in the packet. And it basically says that a property owner is responsible for maintaining the tree or any shrubs, plants, whatever, in the public right-of-way adjacent to their property similar to sidewalks. So basically, whatever's in the public right-of-way is the adjacent property owner's responsibility. What we looked at doing, there's old documents and mentions here and there of the city's tree maintenance schedule, the 5-year rotation or whatever, and most everyone who's brought that up with me says, well, we're on a 5-year rotation, and it's been at least 10 or 15 years since my tree's been pruned. Basically, we looked at that. I looked at that and tried to get a rough estimate of what it would cost, and where my budget is so far below what it would cost to have a regular routine tree maintenance schedule that at this point, we can't possibly do that. What I've been doing is I deal with trees that are more urgent, are more possible hazards or clearance issues. So trees where it's blocking the sidewalk, I go out there and I clear it 8 feet above. Where trucks are running into branches on the street side or cars are getting scratched or whatever, I go out there, try to clear those. We possibly are going to have a larger program to clear street vehicle clearances in conjunction with signing all the streets for street sweeping. I'm not sure where that's at, but I had to go inventory the entire city and see how many trees, or a rough count of trees that need to be pruned for a 10-foot 4-inch clearance on the street side. So, other things, broken branches, dead limbs, things like that. Trees that I had a tree recently that lost 2 limbs within a week, and the first limb hit his car, the second limb hit her car. So I had that just really thinned and weight reduction and all that on the tree. So that's the kind of pruning that I'm doing right now. A lot of residents think my tree needs to be thinned, it needs to be pruned, it needs to be brought down, it's out of balance, all this, and I have to tell them, well, we don't really do that unless there's some kind of possible hazard situation in conjunction with that. So process should be, and there's other documents somewhere that refer, actually this, somewhere here, yeah, in Section A, it does say that whenever a property owner is going to do maintenance on a tree, you need to obtain an encroachment permit. And the process should be that when they apply for an encroachment permit for tree pruning, it comes to me. And then I talk to them and I see who's doing it, what they want to do, how they plan on doing it, and try to get them to have a real arborist do the work, hopefully a certified arborist. If they want to do aesthetic pruning, okay, as long as they're doing it properly and not damaging the tree, not just topping everything or cutting everything off because they don't want to rake up the leaves or whatever, or fruit drop or something like that. That's not a good reason to prune a tree. So that's the maintenance part of it. Another part of this is that the city will plant trees, and we will maintain the tree until it's established, and typically that's 3 years before a tree is established. So by maintain it basically means pruning, means shaping, training the tree up so it's going to grow properly. After 3 years, hopefully we have it trained enough to where it's off the sidewalk, off the street somewhat. We still want the property owner to water. We don't have any way to water trees that we plant unless I come around with a 5-gallon water jug, which I have done in some cases. So to encourage tree planting, we will plant the tree and maintain it for the first few years, but then after that, it's the property owner's responsibility. And the tree adds value in many ways, but it does add monetary value a little bit, not too much, but it's something to properties. So the property owner gets something out of it. monetarily, as well as other benefits, shade and birds and aesthetics and peace of mind and all of that, so.
And if I interject, in these discussions, we've had all staff, people from long histories. Nicole Elmiger, who used to be our tree person, I think back in the 2000s, on up, who have been working through tree items. The bottom line on trees is that it's the homeowner's responsibility to keep them pruned in a safe way. And John says he doesn't have a budget. I mean, it was in the millions of dollars for the tree inventory in order for the city to do this pruning. But the municipal code states that it is the homeowner's responsibility to prune those trees, and they should get a permit. So in the new policy, you may see that there's a pruning permit or some other terminology for it.
Let me interrupt. So what's involved in getting this permit?
People aren't doing that, so, but if you kind of look through the future, if it was, when the new policy comes out, and if it does contain, you have to get a pruning permit, you go down to community development, you know, you pay to get this permit.
And what are the hours for community development?
They're pretty
I'd like to see this
standard
online.
business hours, I
Yeah.
think. I mean, community development is the one that, where they do issue all the building permits for this.
I know.
You know that, but.
Families, I'm just making a point that
Okay,
people
that
who
it's
work
difficult,
during the
yeah.
day, that's a lot to ask for somebody to trim their trees. They're not,
Well, and
gonna
it's
do it.
expensive, too.
They're just not going to do it.
But
Yeah.
Well, whatever the case, but here's what the follow-up is that John's not going to be the code enforcement person on tree pruning, but he will be, part of the process will be hopefully to arm him with public information, also some door hangers that he might drive by and say, hey, I drove by today and you have a tree that is required to have pruning. And now the pruning isn't cosmetic pruning, as John was saying, it's to keep it in a safe way. So, but if he does notice that somebody's just hacked off their tree, then at least he will have some way to impose something. We haven't come up with that portion of it yet. But I don't think the excuse necessarily, I get what you're saying, but if you want to get a kitchen remodel, you want to get your sidewalk replaced, you want to put up a fence in your
That's
front
dramatically
yard.
different from pruning your tree, though. That's,
Well, but the thing is I don't think you should discount the fact that the trees are a value to the homeowner too. It's an aesthetic value, it's shade, you know, property value, so I don't think that there should be this dismissal.
let me go back to what I'm thinking of.
Okay.
Rather than requiring the encroachment permit, they require to have training. And the training can be offered on the weekends or something, and then they can go prune their tree. They don't have to come down and pay for a permit.
But I think that might be
a whole nother thing, I mean, in terms of,
Well, but he's talking about doing it
abilities.
he's talking about doing it one by one when they come to get the encroachment permit, which you're assuming there aren't going to be many. So people are going to be doing it without the encroachment permit,
Sure.
without the city knowing.
I agree with
We
that.
can dig
I think
in.
that-
I'm just
no,
trying
I
to make it
totally
easier.
agree. I think that people they're not gonna get a permit because they're just gonna go hire somebody to get it done and potentially top the tree. My concern,
Well, another thing we talked about is having a list of preferred or accepted contractors who we know what they're doing. So if
I
we
think
have
that would be,
Brandy and Lamb or someone like that who are well-known arborists in the area, they know what they're doing, they can go ahead and do the work. But the other part of that is the people who just go and do it themselves and hack away the tree. We want to get some kind of a fine or some kind of punitive something measure in place that deters that, at least as a deterrent. I don't know how.
yeah, and not to get too into the details of the process yet, but this is kind of the items that have been coming up that John is working through. You'll have a chance to dig in and.
My perspective is trying to make it easy to do it right.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to make it, punish them for doing it wrong. Try to make it.
I agree, because I think so much of that is just, who knows? Who even knows that they're supposed to be pruning their tree?
Well, that's good.
and how
That's
to
part
do
of it is
and
public outreach.
It's the public outreach. Is there a plan for that?
Yeah, that's part of the plan is to come up with a public
Okay, good. Part of the tree policy, okay, good.
Yeah, remember, this is for a whole big package that we don't have yet. We have not had a full comprehensive tree policy in place that encompasses all these different aspects. And so it's a large task for John, but it is trying to adjust all these items. And the side of the young tree care where we put in a new tree, the kind of the thinking on that is that then the city is going to maintain that tree, prune it properly, do the watering up until a certain point, and then you kind of get a certificate of graduation that now your tree is mature and it is your responsibility based on the municipal code.
That's another question is, how many street trees are getting planted? And what's the budget for that? I guess people have to pay for it,
Pay
but
for the trees.
if they're not paying for it, are we just not planting them? It's just,
There's a fee, there's a permit fee, and it depends. In some cases, the way the removal policy is written, if we remove a tree, we replant it, and they don't pay anything. But the planting application says there's a fee and there's a replacement fee, and the replacement fee is half. Currently, the fee is $204, $102 for a replacement tree. What a replacement tree is, I just presumed it was when a tree is removed, it gets replaced, so I don't know. That's not clear right now. But as far as a budget for planting, I have a budget, period. It's
I
just
see,
for
you can
whatever
use
I
it
need
the
to
way
do.
you want to use it. So for this, the camphor that we just approved for removal,
Yeah,
who's going to pay? Is there going to be a replacement tree planted?
I pay for it.
You pay for that, okay.
That's part of the street tree removal policy. It's stated in there that once we take
see.
it out, we pay for the removal, and then we plant.
And that's
the
something
tree.
that we could potentially modify?
That's part of that policy that you guys will be working on, hopefully, and discussing in December.
I just wanted to add to this part of the discussion, because when we moved here 10 years ago, I saw that you could get access to street tree, like that you could do that, but I had a hard time navigating that. And so we actually ended up putting in 2 cherry trees that were on the list, but on our own. I think there are several different types of property owners, and there certainly would be a group that I would put myself in. I don't know about plants, but I appreciate them, and I would be happy to pay for, the one from the city with the maintenance and get the certificate, and then get some education about how best to care for it moving ahead. So I think for that group of people, regardless of permit or not or whatever, there is an active group of people that want to do the right thing, where if that were made available through a Skillshare workshop or something, it would just help people who have trees know how to care for them. Might be part of something that helps people. I think at one point there was like a walking tour of trees or something where you could learn about the different trees in Albany, and that's the kind of thing I feel like there are a lot of people that are stewards of that would appreciate it. On the flip side, I can think of people from my block where if they were told they had to have a permit to trim their tree, they don't even want a tree, they want concrete. So it's kind of like, that's a whole different kind of animal, and so I totally get the tension and the difficulty there. I'm always the carrot rather than but I think you'd have a large group of people that would be excited about education about trees, that would be excited to have you put something on my door, even if it's saying, hey, it's time to do something about that, that explain what do I do about it. So I think I am excited that you're doing this. I think the policy overall is going to be great. I certainly understand and hear I have a gardener, he cuts whatever he's supposed to. I had no idea that I should have, so that's something that I'm learning even just now. And I imagine there are other people in that
Gardeners
boat.
and landscapers aren't arborists. They may be,
Absolutely.
but not necessarily.
Yeah, and I didn't even know that we should have people, so good note to me.
One thing, because it seems like the decisions that we make here cause or don't cause the budget for cutting down tree. Like we instigate the cost for cutting down a tree and then the removal.
Well,
We approve it, right, but that's kind of what we do, and that impacts the budget. But, there's all these other ways the money could be spent, even to plant more street trees, but our commission's not really meant to do that, which seems it feels kind of strange to just be on the one side and not encouraging the other side. And then also, if there is a budget that can be used just with your discretion, maybe it could be a budget for outreach. You're one person, but maybe you could have some kind of help with that outreach, high school students or something. This is brainstorming. I just think there is this huge, which Todd mentioned, and I just think the education component is huge. And I know as an homeowner who has a camphor tree right in front of my property, and who recently had to pay for it to be pruned, and it was permitted. It was it was through I hope it was, but the arborist.
I didn't hear about it.
Oh, you didn't hear? Oh, terrible. Anyway, it was expensive. He did it right. It was a two-man crew, and it was expensive. And I can't imagine anybody else paying what we paid for that. So I see it being a real.
Some people have that reaction. Why should I pay for it?
Right, but it's not, I mean, it was like rent for a month. It wasn't cheap. So I guess that's the concern, is even if we're asking people to not only just get the permit, but to prune the
The
tree.
thing about trees is that the attitude about trees is not always a good attitude. It's just a tree, you know.
Right.
It's a profession, it's a skill, and it's dangerous. Someone's climbing through your tree with chainsaws and, you know, cutting tools. It's hazardous, and people die pruning trees every year. Somebody dies. More often not around power lines, but otherwise too, falling out of trees or limbs falling down or the whole tree falling while they're up there trying to work it. So that's, I'm just
But that's a good,
justifying
no,
why
I
it's
think, but
expensive
no,
to,
I'm not
you
saying
know.
that it shouldn't have, I'm not saying it, we shouldn't have paid that amount, because clearly there was like a three-man crew. I guess what I'm saying is I can't imagine other people being able to, you know, many other people taking the time
Another
to
thing
do
is
that.
a lot of the pruning and what 1414 says, it's to ensure that your tree's safe for vehicles and pedestrians. It's not saying you have to go and shape your tree and make it pretty and thin it out so
Right.
the air gets through and my neighbors can see the bay and all this. That's really not, it's not really the best thing for a tree. You know, you let a tree grow naturally. You cut out dead wood, broken branches, rubbing branches a little thinning, but basically you want the tree to just grow naturally.
Well, that's
So,
good to know.
some people pay more than they should to, you know, some people have this done every year to the tree and have it all prettied up. I have people tell me, Tony came every year, it needs trimming, it needs trimming. I go out there and look at it, it's beautiful. It's the most beautiful live oak near the high school, this one that I'm thinking of. It's so nice and cleaned out, and too much so, I think, and I'm telling it doesn't need it. No, but it needs it. Tony did it every year. I'm like, well, what can I say?
John, do you want
Doesn't really
to talk about the young tree care? And I mean, I thought this was a good thing, that if you were talking about, if you are pruning it properly at the beginning, then it requires less later.
I think that's part of the idea why we would want to take care of the young planted trees till they're established, to get them trained up properly. 'Cause, a lot of trees, when they're young, they're branching out low and they're getting into the sidewalk or into the street, and people come by and just break them, or somebody thinks they're doing a good deed and they snip everything. They just kind of stub all the branches off. And then I come by a couple of years later and have to clean up all the dead, dying, stubbed off branches. So yeah, that's a part of it. And then the kind of handover, the way I see it, the handover, you get your certificate or whatever, but that's where you get information about, you know, this is your tree, this is what we did, this is what you need to do to keep it going, these are the proper things. And what I would want to say is that this is what you should be asking your arborist about. I don't feel good about saying, okay, this is how you prune a tree, so go ahead and have at it, because I've done that. I've had classes, and I showed people how to prune, and people hear what they want to hear, and I come back the next week, and they snipped and made a little, you know, a lollipop out of a shrub, little tree, but just the general information to appreciate it, I think, to understand and appreciate what goes on is more what I see as important for the public.
And I think you mentioned making a list of recommended or approved arborists that, you know, that's very helpful for people that are just like, I don't know.
Yeah, right now we don't do that, and I actually, when people ask me that, I deny that because I don't want to conflict of
into that
interest
side of
or, so.
But if we
we
can-
have an
yeah.
approved list that's open to any contractor to come in and say, I want to be on your list, and they show us their credentials, their insurance, whatever, and we say, okay, you meet our criteria, you're on our list, then
I think that's a great, I mean, is that something that we can help? I don't know if that's really goes into that's not our purview, is it?
Public Works would handle that, and the big key is that it's open to everybody. We'd set the criteria they have to meet in order to be on that list, and we're not
would?
favoring one or the other over the other.
Not Park and Recs. We
No,
wouldn't.
Public
Okay,
Works
Public
would.
Works, right, yeah. I would just say that, I mean, I'm sure people, if they don't get some recommendation, then they are going to just go to their gardener or the cheapest person potentially. So there's that that concern. But
I have a couple questions. When a homeowner pays the fee to plant or replace, does that cover the cost of the city planting the tree?
Yeah, that's,
In real life.
oh, the actual,
No, I mean, there's two questions, because, yes, there is, what does it do to John's budget? But also, it's not clear to me, when you go in to get a permit to replace your kitchen, it does not include that Albany's going to come and do that replacement for me. So I did not assume
sure.
that fee meant Albany would come and plant. And I think more people might be open to that.
That's a good point, and that's something that we're trying to work out too, is what exactly the fee means for both removal. Definitely does not cover removal costs. I mean, even the smallest tree is going to be more than $200 to remove and get the roots out. For planting, it may cover the cost, generally not, almost, basically. I think $250 about is what I was getting from one contractor last year to plant trees, which is a good price. He's retired this year, and the people I'm talking to now are saying more like $350, so maybe half, And that's not including cutting concrete, which is also on the application, but at $126 to cut concrete. That's more like a $500 job to cut the tree basin, so.
But it does mean the city handles it. If you submit an application to plant a tree and you pay all the fees on there, you or some designee comes out and plants that tree.
Yeah.
and does the homeowner pay for the tree? I
No,
mean, and then they can pick whatever tree they want. I mean, on the list, and then they get that tree.
Right now, they submit an application with the fee. I go out and look at the location and look at what species they chose to see if both are proper. So if someone wants to plant camphor on standage, I'm going to talk them out of it. I had one on, I think Adams recently. They want to plant 2 southern magnolias. They already have 1 tree on a property, and southern magnolias will, rip up everything eventually. So I talk to them, I just talk to them and give them some suggestions about some maybe better trees.
It has to be, you have to be the fronting property owner, right? You can't do it. Yes, right, okay.
Yeah,
John,
especially now if we're turning over responsibility to maintenance, we can't have a tenant apply to plant the tree. It has to be the property owner who's ultimately going to be responsible for that, so.
Is your team involved at all in trees that are not on the street?
What do you mean on
Private
private property?
Yeah, so not street fronting trees on lots.
Unfortunately, no. Fortunately and unfortunately, because I'd like to see kind of a heritage tree ordinance or something, or landmark or heritage. In the last few weeks, I saw a 100-foot redwood tree and a 100-foot, or 110-foot maybe incense cedar taken down for no real reason except the property owner told me it's too big.
Wow.
I said, yeah, but how long did it take to get that big? 100 years or more.
And you just
well.
happened to drive by, or was it a permit?
A neighbor called, both times neighbor called, oh, is there something we can do about this tree? They're taking down this beautiful tree. And both of them were in the back part of the yard. It wasn't like right against the house. It just because, oh, when it drops those things in the yard, I'm always raking. Oh.
But John, you're also going through, when you want to plant a tree, you can't just go, I want this tree, and you put it in there. There's a number of criteria that have to be considered, that you go out and evaluate before you let someone plant a tree. Distance from a stop sign, size of the well, if you have.
Well, that's what I meant about the location, that I approve the location and the species, so I have to make sure. And another thing is putting someone that wants to have 3 trees in front of their property. Most Albany properties, there's not room for 3 trees. When they're like puppies, when they're planted, yeah, there's 3 little 5-foot trees. They look cute, they're nice, but and I'm trying to think long-term.
Well, I would like to suggest when you do finish this, and presumably the website will be revised, that it is an opportunity to say, the city of Albany will plant your street tree for this really low fee. We will advise you on what tree would be suitable. We will plant it for an extra fee. We will cut the concrete. I think a lot of people don't know that and would be excited. So I think this is great, a real opportunity.
What's your budget?
What's my budget?
Yeah.
It's how much money he has to spend in a year.
Is it,
I ask you my weight. Is that next?
what's that, right?
What's your budget? Elder?
And there have been, I know that in the last 10 years, there's been several street tree events where I think outside organizations, was it, remember what the name of the organization was? Came in and sponsored.
Cool.
It was either free or like $50.
Oh, that's really cool.
They'd have a big
Or like
weekend event where they,
Relief and organizations
Yeah,
like
something
that.
like
They work
that.
in places like Oakland and Richmond. I don't know if Albany fits their criteria.
well, they have in the last 10 years. I know twice, I think it's
Relief
happened.
is
at
that
least. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But
We used to host block tree planting.
block tree, yeah, and some other things too.
Yeah, which, was kind of fun, a weekend, and the neighbors all got together and paid the fee to get the trees or whatever it was, but. And in San Francisco, you could apply to, like as a block, that you wanted to take out a bunch of the cement places and actually plant trees, and you could get together. Nice community building type things, but also neighborhood beautification projects as well.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that there's some sidewalks that clearly the tree planting area, with the planting strip area was just concrete, somebody just poured some concrete in there, so.
Yeah, and I have neighbors who have said, we can't have street trees because of those. I had no idea that the city would cut the concrete. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I wondered also on the pruning permit, if it would be possible, particularly just for that kind of permit, if they could apply online and send some photos of the tree. When I got my East Bay Mud rebate for pulling out my lawn, that's all they did. I sent photos to them, and then that could make it easier and really more accessible. I'd rather do it by online than coming down to the city. A thought?
Maybe you could have different permits, one which is lower cost if it's going to be done by a professional arborist, and one that's more if you're going to try to do it yourself. I don't know. Because that would involve, it's being done by a professional arborist, you don't need to go talk to them. But if it's being done by somebody who isn't a certified arborist, then maybe it would be more expensive and you would go talk to them. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And you would talk to them and encourage them not to do it.
For now, I think I want to know the plan, even if it's a
Sure.
professional arborist, probably,
I'm just trying to think of a way to motivate that. Oh, it's cheaper if you get a professional arborist, a certified arborist to do it.
The technology side of it, I know that community development is working through this, so, but is to get some of their permits online. So they are, we have a financial software that can allow that. I think it's not, we're not to that point yet, but I know that they're working through that for some easier permits.
What I read through, it doesn't seem like it's clear that that the city's supposed to be paying for the removal and paying for the replanting.
It's in
Is it-
our
oh.
policy, not this.
It's in the policy, right, so,
Street
right, it's in the policy, but, and that's something the commission this commission put together,
That's correct, and the city council approves it.
and the city council approves it. I just, as we've been thinking about the removal, that's one thing that I think maybe we can talk about, if not now in December, is just this idea of like, what should we be paying for as a city? I mean, if it's damaging I really like what Shelley and Mark Hurley came up with in terms of the sidewalk. But then what if somebody I guess we wouldn't get rid of a tree if somebody just wants it out because they consider it ugly, right? So that's not a problem. I'm just wondering about those situations where we get rid of a tree just because a homeowner doesn't want it there. Maybe we don't, so maybe that's not a problem.
You guys
just felt
set
like there
the
was some-
criteria, so I
we
think
set the
that's what
criteria, okay.
you guys want to, when we get to that point, is you're really thinking through, like, those situations. You know, the goal of, is to keep as many street trees as possible unless it meets some sort of criteria.
Because I know that before I even came on this commission, I reviewed some of the past, the more recent tree removal requests, and one was just because somebody's like, oh, this kind of too crowded. Like, it didn't seem like there's 4 trees altogether, and so a couple wanted to be, I don't know, I don't remember, but it didn't seem like it made sense to me why it was removed, and it was. And so my concern about that scenario is, one, it didn't seem like it was required to be removed, but then we're actually paying, bearing the costs for just an aesthetic opinion of somebody's, which seems really.
Well, that one, I wanted to have those 2 trees, 4 trees planted within 5 or 6 feet of each other, had no future at all. One tree was already, and I talked the property owner into changing which trees they wanted out, so we kept the more valuable and nicer trees. There was an arbutus at the end that was already growing, you know, leaning over because it's reaching out for sun because the, whatever the other tree was is overshadowing it
They
already, but that's.
approached the city, right? It wasn't, you didn't proactively talk to them about it, did they?
Yeah, they applied originally.
So I guess when they're applying.
What I don't know is who did the planting. In some cases, the city planted more.
I see.
There was a push to plant, there still is a push to plant 500 trees a year for 10 years for the climate action plan, which is near impossible. For one thing, my budget wouldn't support that, and I can't find 500 places. I can find more than we're doing now.
But about how many have been planted, like in the last year?
50 or so last year, yeah.
Aren't there places to plant, though, just even in the parks, even if it's not on the streets?
There are. But there's time and money constraints right now.
Yeah, I mean,
so,
that's then again where we're coming to this. Like, here we're paying as much as, we're paying for all the removal. Sure, we'll pay for the removal, but oh, sorry, you want to plant a tree? I just think it seems kind of backwards to me that we're so ready to help people cut down the tree, pay for the cutting down, and we're not putting that budget towards the planting.
Well, well, the plan is for the city to pay for planting and to encourage that and to take care of the new tree until it's established.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is the
And
more trees
for
we allow.
removals, the only removals that we approve are trees that really need to come out. We don't remove trees because somebody feels they're ugly or it doesn't, it's not balanced with their landscaping or something.
I think John's budget would be happy if you decided to remove that language out of this. But I think it's something that you guys definitely should be discussing when we get to the policy. And I know that you and Commissioner Romero are the subcommittee for that. And so hopefully over the next couple of months, we can kind of tackle chunks of it and really talk it through.
Yeah.
And maybe you can come up with some good proposals
Yeah,
for Commissioner to think about.
Okay.
Well, it's getting late, but I have one more question, which was, John, when you were talking about the future street sweeping signs, and I don't know if that's the entire city or particular areas, and my real question is, a 10-foot for clearance on the street side.
Yeah.
My house is, well, it's on the 600 block of San Carlos. We have real narrow curb strip, the 27-inch or whatever. Got the wires overhead.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that our street trees, which were planted by the city, are lower than 10-foot 4 on the street side. And I'm not sure what would happen to our trees if it had to have that kind of clearance. So is that part of the approved street tree list criteria to be able to be pruned up that high?
Yeah, pretty much. What I'm looking at on the street tree list are trees that grow at least 15 feet mature height, and it could be tough for some trees. It definitely.
Well, I'm not sure how high the
10-foot
wires
4
are.
10-foot 4 inches. How high? What?
How high are the wires when you've got a
35, 40. The top wires are 35, 40.
No, but the bottom wires, because you're trying to keep the tree below those, aren't you?
No. The very top set of wires are high voltage. The other wires, tree can grow through those wires. That's something that apparently hasn't been that clear in this city.
And so then the cable companies or the phone company are responsible if a limb falls and takes out one of their wires?
Basically, yeah. It rarely happens though. All those things have steel cables. It's more likely the damage that would happen would be poles would cave in if a big enough tree came down and fell on those lines. So PG&E has a distribution wire like that too. That's aerial cable. It's kind of like your service strap that goes to your house. It's twisted, and instead of 3 separate conductors, there's just one that's insulated and twisted. And I've seen mature trees laying on those wires and just sitting there. And actually, we had a eucalyptus off of the hill this winter. Came down and laid across wires like that. It doesn't cause damage. So.
Great, well, that's all good to
And
know.
The service drop to your house is designed for some casual tree contact, so unless there's a lot of stress from a tree on that service drop, it doesn't really need any pruning either.
Well, I still, excuse me, worry about getting up to 10 feet before it's allowed to branch out toward the street.
Yeah, well, it's not like a cookie cutter cut down the block. Some trees, I mean, there are some trees, the trunk leans out into the street. Street sweepers are going to have to deal with that. They're going to have to work around it. AC Transit is going to have double-decker buses also, and they're requesting 14 feet in some places. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other comments? We close it up for that item. Thank you, John. And the next item's the street tree list subcommittee.
We met, and we met with John, and he put up with questions. It was 3-on-1, and really appreciate it. It can't have been easy. And Eileen made some really good suggestions. She's not here tonight to make them. My preference would be to wait until she is here. She sent Todd and I her comments, and it didn't come through on my. So if you feel prepared to discuss it, great.
Well, I don't know if now's the time,
Yeah, just
so
an update
we
you
have
guys
had a
met.
meeting, and I was pleasantly surprised by the length of the list. It was quite a lengthy list of trees to look at, so long that I didn't get through them all. But we did make some productive comments, and
Yeah.
I like to think they're productive. We will let John be the judge, but.
Well, no, there were good things to think about. I like your comments that you sent around too. I agree mostly with that. The eucalyptus is
Yeah, it's an education problem.
Yeah, there's hundreds of species of eucalyptus, and some are suitable, some aren't.
Just very quickly, the comment was, since there's so much move to remove eucalyptus, why do we have all these eucalyptus approved here? And the reason is, well, they're really dramatically different trees. They just all happen to have the word eucalyptus in them. And so that's really not a reason to take them off the list. We just need to let people know that,
That
And
they
I've
need
been
the city to buy them.
looking at the list again. There's a couple more that I would want to remove also. And I've also been trying to transfer it all to a spreadsheet, so it's searchable on an
Good,
Excel
yeah.
spreadsheet too, with a little more information about whether it's native and deciduous or all that, so.
Thank you, thanks, that's excellent.
Yeah.
So we were trying to think of like suggestions that would be general guidance rather than individual trees also.
Right.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
So are you guys will be meeting again, maybe, before we come back to the,
I think probably so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And also I need to get your comments and Aileen's
Okay.
that did not come through
Didn't
to
come
me.
through, okay.
I'll make sure to get you Aileen's.
Okay, thanks. So item 6.3 is soda tax, and that's my update. I think there was two, when all the different department chairs came to present, and there was two items that overlapped, which the council even pointed out, and one was our water bottle filling.
Which we knew, because it didn't come from us, so.
Oh, right. There's another one. Do you remember the other one? Maybe free exercise classes? I can't remember what the other item was, but it was really just presentation of suggestions. There was a wall of suggestions that people could vote with their little stickers. There was discussion. I'm sorry I didn't stay for that city council discussion on it, but they were not making a decision, right, Shelley?
That's correct. And there were a lot of comments about wanting to stick to how it was written, the intention of it, which was to focus on children. So there were a lot of suggestions about, for seniors or some other programs that didn't really necessarily relate to the soda tax or the sugar sweetened beverage tax. And so they were just a lot of reiterating that point. There was a lot of support for bottle filling stations. One council member would like the bottle filling, the water to be carbonated. In Paris, they have carbonated water coming out, and I think that her thinking was that
It'll be expensive.
take out the sugar, but then at least the bubble it creates like a fun feeling. You might
Just need
drink
to
more
move
water.
the town over Natural Spring, I think would be.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Who's going to refill those carbonated filters?
A bottle filling station was a favorite of a lot of people, and it would be great. But no decision. They'll get once they get closer, because it's with the next budget cycle that they'll work towards a decision. So
Oh, I see. Okay.
just an
It
initial.
can't be used right now anyway, but okay.
Was there any update on how much we've brought in this year? Was it still around 60 or?
No, it's like 100 something now.
Yeah.
Yeah, over 100.
They think that it may exceed what they had estimated. I know. So the goal of soda tax is to have no money.
That's right.
Yeah, everybody go out, buy more soda. Let's increase that.
That was the other comments were to possibly not fund programs that are ongoing because they don't know how much money they'll have in a certain amount of time, but maybe one-time things that they could fund or was one of the council members' preference.
Okay. And the last item is future agenda items.
I would like to ask the status of dog parks.
We don't have any dog parks. Is that your question?
Section B.
Oh, Section B. The status of what you're actually asking is.
Dogs in parks, that's what I meant to say. Because whenever we discuss Section B, it needs to be part of something bigger. So that's dogs in parks, is that right?
Yes, and I think we actually folded into something bigger is looking for a space in Albany for these. There's a couple requests from community, or actually they're on our work plan. Is there a possibility of a new spot to actually make an official dog park in Albany?
Or community garden somewhere else.
And then could that move the community garden? And also mountain biking, whatever. And that was folded into the Caltrans property. And so Jeff has sent me, Community Development Director has sent me a couple pieces of information. There isn't a map, but he has a couple locations. It just didn't make it on today's agenda because I thought we were going to go a little bit long. So in December, I can bring back the two locations and also bring the plans for the south side of the, under the freeway, what's going in there, so you guys can look at that.
And also the key route, right? Is that considered park and rec?
Key route, the median, the middle?
Yeah.
It's city property, yes. It's
So it's, but it's designated as something our commission would have potentially some say in.
And we have a capital improvement project and also on your work plan, which is the meandering path through Key Route Boulevard. It's considered a linear park in the master plan. And the master plan calls for there to be a pathway that goes through there. So in our CIP projects, it's called the Key Route Path.
And that's already set. There's no, that's not a, I'm just. No, you could. We could, okay. So it's
It hasn't
an
come
area that we
before the
could.
commission.
There's not a lot to it, it's a path, yeah.
Oh, it's just a path, but it hasn't,
There's not a lot to it.
it has, nothing has come to the commission about it.
Okay. But I guess I'm wondering if that's in play in terms of what we can look at for locations for things, if we could actually consider that area.
Well, I was considering, so there's a
There
few
are such big
blocks.
trees, that's true.
Now's not time for discussion, we're just
Yeah.
talking about the agenda. We can't really discuss it now, I'm sorry.
Okay, so anyway, just wondering if that map could include that, if it's applicable, or if we could.
For those uses, probably not.
Okay.
For a dog park
Bocce?
or a.
Bocce?
Bocce, yeah. But I would just say, as a part of that discussion, that is a much a neighborhood
Got it.
input area.
Okay.
For sure, because they're facing that location.
Okay. So December, that, and then the tree, I think the tree policy potentially. Okay. Thanks, guys. Long meeting. So I guess meeting adjourned.
That's right, there we go.